And he's outstanding.
He's great. Okay, let's get to this week's blend game, which is hashtag Sci-Fi Horror Blend. Gabe, why don't you kick us off? Because you don't get to play the blend game that often.
Yeah, you guys know that I don't love picking these because I'm bad at favorites.
Right.
But this one was, I think for me, was pretty easy because I think there's a film that is a fantastic film and is a perfect example of the genre all at the same time that I happen to love. And so my favorite sci-fi horror blend film would have to be Alien, the first Alien.
Okay.
I think it's undoubtedly sci-fi in its setting and its characters and even the plot and what's going on. It's very much a sci-fi film, but it uses raw and pure horror techniques with both the monster and kind of everything that Ripley runs into. I fell in love with Alien when I was a little kid, as a little kid who loved horror movies. And to this day, it still holds up. So
controversial
for me, that was
pick.
the only choice.
Great
choice.
Yeah.
Going out on a limb. Kevin, where are you at? Sci-fi horror blend.
I'm going to go a little more modern. And while I understand the appeal
he's going to go Borat 2.
Yeah, I'm going to go Borat 2. No, I went with The Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Tremendous.
And Sigourney Weaver, there's our through line.
Yeah.
I think, when Lauren and I saw Cabin in the Woods for the first time, it felt like the first time I saw Scream. And I'm not saying Scream's a sci-fi horror film, but I mean it in the sense of like it changed, in my opinion, it changed the genre. It moved the genre forward. It created a different way to look at the genre. And Cabin in the Woods is a film that sat on the shelf for 3 or so years. Drew Goddard directed it. Whedon wrote it, I believe. And so it was.
And they had Chris Hemsworth in it, for God's sakes.
Right. And so this comes out
technically pre-Thor, Chris Hemsworth.
You're right. And it came out in the middle of the MCU, which is kind of weird, right? So Hemsworth in this film, I mean, the sci-fi element is undeniable. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there is a reveal in this movie that brings the sci-fi element into it. And all I will say is the elevator scene, as they're riding the elevator, is truly one of the most insane sequences I've ever seen in a film. Like do you guys remember the edit in the movie? Remember the edit in the film when they're in the hallway of the elevator lobby and it dings and they all come out?
Yes.
Just insanity. So the cool thing about I also love that the stoner in that movie is the smart one. Like that was kind of like they played with stereotypes and different things in a really fun way. But Hemsworth is great in it. If people aren't familiar with it, imagine it like an Evil Dead movie, but with like a sci-fi spin. Specifically, they go out to a cabin in the woods, literally, and things start happening in the cabin that are strange. People start dying, and then we learn through the film that something. I won't say anything, but I want to say this: Richard Jenkins is so good in this movie. Everybody, the cast is who plays
Bradley
Jenkins?
Whitford. Bradley Whitford.
Jenkins and Whitford have some of the best banter. Like this movie is so good. I know it's kind of underrated. It didn't make a ton of money, but if you haven't seen it, seek it out. It is genuinely one of the most pleasantly surprising, awesome sci-fi horror films ever. I was gonna go with The Thing, but I love The Thing. But I just feel like Cabin in the Woods had such a massive impression on me, and I love that movie. So,
and I'll add, Cabin in the Woods is one of those special horror movies where if I have friends or people that like don't really watch horror, don't really like horror, or they're worried about jump scares or whatever, it's one of those that is so elevated in a unique way and so entertaining in a unique way that I recommend it to those people. I'm like, you'll still love this. It's
a good point because like it while it is a graphically disgusting film at times, it always feels fun. It's not like
it's
you're not
always
like
taking the trope or the cliche and doing it on purpose as the joke kind of thing.
So. And it's not to the point where it's self-aware, where it's like a spoof. It's a genuine horror film. They teeter that line perfectly. It doesn't become a joke. It just has a very fun. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some death scenes that are disgusting. Like there are some brutal stuff in this film. So it does get violent. I mean, don't watch it with your kids.
Have you watched
obviously.
Freaky yet? Did you see Freaky yet?
No, I want to see Freaky. I haven't seen it yet with Vince Vaughn.
I saw Freaky this week, and that movie, when we get to talk about that movie, the death scenes in it are
Are they
off
freaky?
the charts.
Can't
They
wait.
are off
It's
the
too
charts.
I'm excited.
We'll talk about it.
All right, Sean, I'm curious to hear yours.
Yeah, because I made that Night of the Creeps pick the other week.
And someone sent you a DVD today.
Yes, I've gotten really good reactions from people who are liking the older picks. I went and sought out a 1986 film called Chopping Mall. Have you guys heard of Chopping Mall?
No.
That's the greatest title I've ever heard. How have I not seen this?
It's tremendous.
Chopping Mall?
It's Chopping Mall. And it's literally these employees. It's like Mallrats, but a horror movie.
Sounds great.
These kids who work at, like 20-something kids, who work at a mall, a shopping mall, who stay after hours and lock all their stores down, and they decide they're going to have a party in their in the showrooms or behind the scenes of their stores. They get pizza, they get booze, they start hooking up, and the robot security system in the mall malfunctions and goes on a killing spree. And it's literally just the Chopping Mall, and it's tremendous.
Oh, I'm already sold.
It's incredibly cheesy.
I'm buying it right now.
But
that's the best title I've ever heard in my entire life.
It's great.
It's brilliant.
And again, it's technology going haywire. It's got all the great 80s things that you love about it, and the fact that it's really overstated, and the kills are incredibly gory. And so, is it my favorite? No, I love it. I think it's tremendous, but I kind of wanted to call it out just to put it on people's radars. So.
Hey guys, sorry I can't be with you this week. I am doing a little journey here out in the middle of the woods, as you can see. But I did want to weigh in with my pick for Sci-Fi Horror Blend. And it's a boring, unsexy choice, but the obvious choice, of course, is Alien. Not only is it one of the greatest films of all time, it obviously ranks among the greatest sci-fi films of all time. And yes, it is absolutely terrifying. It's basically Jaws in space. But like the shark was in Jaws, the xenomorph is just this perfectly manicured monster within the confines of space. You have a creature with acid blood, so if you attempt to shoot him or stab him, you risk killing yourself because the acid could eat through the hull of the ship and open up a portal into space, and then you're all dead. So the design, the H.R. Geiger designs of the xenomorph were absolutely gorgeous. The creation of Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, one of the greatest characters in the history of cinema, not just within the action or the horror or the sci-fi genre, but just the genre period. And it's a beautiful film. Obviously, James Cameron took it into a much more action kind of thriller, which I think is what raises the question of whether or not Alien fits. But the very first Alien is absolutely a horror film. It's absolutely one of the greatest horror films of all time. And yes, obviously it fits within the sci-fi realm because you have, the alien element, the space element. But hope it's not too boring of a pick. I have a feeling I may not be the only one to have picked this. Maybe you guys branched out a little bit more, but it's how I feel. It's how Daenerys feels. She feels that way too. And hope you guys have a good show. Talk to you next week.
This is a stupid question. Are zombies sci-fi?
No, I don't think so.
It depends on the. There are different kinds of zombies. Some of them are like resurrected for interesting paranormal reasons or like demonic reasons, but some of them are like I would say 28 Days Later or like a Resident Evil. It's because of like a science experiment. So like
Interesting.
Technically it's science. I think it depends on the origin story.
I wonder why. Yeah, I've actually never thought about it before because I think to myself.
I mean, I guess
zombies,
technically it is because they don't exist.
It's
Wait,
science
I want to
fiction.
throw this one at you. Craig D, going to audience picks, he picked T2. I don't consider T2 to be a horror movie.
It's funny because then we go back to the age-old debate that Jake and I had about
Is the
T-1000 being a
Terminator-
monster.
Yeah.
Is T1 more of a horror movie than T2?
Yes, I think so.
Right? That was my issue with it.
Yeah, T1 is the alien and T2 is aliens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
That's
what's
kinda how I
funny
think.
about I
Jim
will say
Cameron
this,
had
though.
it again.
I want to give my producer Chris credit for this. This morning we were doing a story about like technology and like the horrors of things, and he put on Brad Feidel's T2 score underneath the segment as the story was being told. And I literally messaged him on our little chat function. I said, "Dude, this is like genuinely a horror segment. It sounds like a horror, because if you think about that music, I mean, T2 is pretty terrifying. I will argue
It's
certainly thrilling.
I wouldn't argue sci-fi horror, but I will tell you that it has one of the most horrific scenes I've ever seen in a movie, and that's Linda Hamilton's fence shot as she just disintegrates into nothing. And like that, and I don't know, and this kind of goes into that age-old debate of what's horror, what's sci-fi.
Right. Like, just because a movie uses like in one or two places uses like a horror trope or tactic in its filmmaking, does that make it horror movie?
I mean, the T-1000 is supposed to be scary, It's supposed to be a terrifying, relentless thing, but I feel it's more sci-fi, a stronger sci-fi vibe than than horror.
I guess so what are some other sci-fi horror picks that we would think of?
Okay. So Rachel KH chose Danny Boyle's Sunshine. Brody Cottenham, Adam Kahn, and many others went with Alien. Johnny Cat, Cardi Dante, and many others went with John Carpenter's The Thing. Vanessa D said that her underrated choices are Mimic and Scanner, but the obvious choice is Alien. Yeah. And then Damian McDonald chose Cube, and I don't know Cube.
Cube is that's a fascinating choice. I was glad someone picked that. It's a really interesting movie. I used to watch it a ton when I was a kid. It's about these people that wake up in a cube. Like, people wake up in this room, and then they find out that there's more people in rooms that they're joined with. They have no idea why they're there. And they're trying to figure out how to get out, and
I saw that it's called Love is Blind. It's on Netflix.
Very horrifying things begin to happen as they try to traverse the cube, as it were.
All right, so wait, okay. So thank you very much for your audience participations. Next week we're playing #Halloween Movie Blend. All right, explain that. Isn't that what we've been doing?
Well, so this will be a film that either very heavily features a set piece. I will let people stretch to like a set piece, like a heavily featured Halloween set piece, but I would love for people to give us their favorite Halloween movie that involves.
Can we take Carpenter's franchise off the board?
I think we should. I think that should be automatic.
That feels too obvious, doesn't it?
As your favorite?
Yeah.
I feel like Halloween.
If listeners want to submit it, absolutely do. We want to know your favorite.
As a challenge to ourselves, we will take
That's
Carpenter's franchise off the board.
To clarify the rules, does the movie have to actually have a Halloween day in the movie? Does it can it be like themed in an October thing? Does it have to be on Halloween?
I like the October theme. I like the idea of the holiday of Halloween being involved, and that stretches beyond horror movies, which I think is fun.
Kevin, you can pick Puby. That's fine.
You can pick Puby.
It's fine.
Wait, so on a serious question, like, does It Follows count?
Is there a Halloween scene in that?
Isn't that in the fall? It's very Carpenter-esque.
That's too October-y.
That's we would celebrate. That's a festive movie for the Halloween season.
Be tangentially attached to the Halloween.
Gabe, give some examples.
Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat.
The anthology.
There's a bunch of Disney movies that take place at Halloween Town.
Hocus Pocus.
Nightmare Before Christmas. Technically, has a very strong Halloween theme to it.
But see, we get away from we've been stuck in horror. I'm sure there's people that listen that don't necessarily love horror, so we can kind of play around.
I think we can get creative with this. All right, so play along using #Halloween Movie Blend.